going to hear from the wonderful Natasha Strim, the founder of Nonna Pia's Gourmet Sauces. Now, I had the privilege of speaking with Natasha the other week with Michelle, just as a sort of preamble to this evening. And I have a lot of conversations with different women talking about work-life balance and work-life integration, but I can honestly say that speaking with Natasha, Michelle could not get me off the phone quick enough because I was so enthralled. I had tears in my eyes at one point, just talking about the challenges of being an entrepreneur and being a parent and being a woman. So, without further ado, Natasha Strim.
Good evening, everyone. Again, I'm Natasha Strim, and I did talk for the Forum of Women's Entrepreneurs 2 years ago, and I'm really excited to be back. I can't remember what I said 2 years ago, but kind of going to say the same, except there might be a couple more chapters. Firstly, I'm extremely disappointed that the tomato salad didn't have our balsamic reduction on it. So I'm almost going to leave, but I kind of felt a bit weird about that. So this is my speech. It's got 4 points. I only need to do 4 things. So, got it. So what I'm going to do is talk to you about where our company started from, where we've come to today, and sort of explain the trials and tribulations that our company, in particular I've had, especially as being a female running a company. We started off, I'm a physiotherapist, and I moved to Canada to be a physiotherapist, and now I'm selling balsamic vinegar. And I remember my daughter going to school and saying, my mum quit her job, she's going to sell vinegar now. And the teachers are like, oh, that's kind of weird. Anyway, so we started at the Whistler Farmers Markets, and we sold our vinegar because my husband's the creator, he's a chef, and he started making these balsamic reductions. So we decided to see how we would go selling them at the Whistler Farmers Markets. And they did really well, and we thought, wow, there's a bit of cash here. Maybe we can have a family vacation every year. Well, as it stands now, we have the cash and no time for a vacation. But anyways, we decided to do every farmer's market we possibly could. Then we started doing Christmas markets and Christmas shows, and our kids were 4 and 6 at the time. They didn't have a weekend off for probably 4 years. They just did farmer's markets all summer. So our summers were spent selling balsamic reductions and watching every other family walk past with ice cream going to the lake. And we're like, wow, this kind of sucks. But we then decided that it would be a really good idea to then sell it in retail, because gone would be the days of the Whistler Farmers Markets and going to the Christmas shows. We could just stick it on a store shelf, and then we could just sit back and watch the money roll in, because there can't be any work involved with that. Well, we were fortunate enough to get our product, and it was the first store that we ever went into. We went into the IGA on Esplanade, and we took our product down there, and at that time we had these big 375ml ice wine bottles that were $18.99, and the guy was nice enough, Kelly, the owner at the time, was nice enough to let us put it on the shelf. And it didn't quite fit on any shelf in particular because it was too tall, so we were way up the top. And then a couple of weeks later, I said to my husband, now we need to go down and just see how it's doing. Well, we drive down from Whistler to IGA and we see our product, and it's exactly where we put it, except it's got dust on it and not one bottle has been sold. And I said, oh my God, how embarrassing. Like, we haven't even sold a bottle. Like, what's going wrong? Well, then we realised that firstly, people couldn't see our product. Secondly, they didn't know what it was. It's a huge spend and they needed to taste it. So gone were the days of sitting back and watching the money. Well, it didn't actually happen. Then we started driving back and forth from Whistler to sample our product. And that's how we got our product into people's mouths and started growing our product. At that point, I was working during the daytime as a physiotherapist, and my husband was a general manager with Whistler Blackcomb up at Intrawest. And we were cooking vinegar during the nighttime, borrowing restaurants from the Wildwood Cafe, from the Nicholas North restaurant when the golfing season was done at the end of the day, and that's where we were cooking our vinegar. And then one time my husband woke up in the middle of the night and he's like, oh my God, my chest is hurting, I've got pain down my arm. And I thought, that's it, we're working too hard, he's having a heart attack. Well, we ended up in the emergency, and the emergency physician on call at the time was a friend of ours, and she said, look, you can't keep working your day job and then spending the entire night cooking vinegar because you're going to die. You need to jump ship. You've got to make a decision one way or the other. We looked at each other and we said, let's go for it. So we had a huge mortgage. Of course, everyone does in Whistler and refinances, it never goes down. But we had a huge mortgage, we had young kids, and we decided to quit our jobs and then just start selling vinegar. So the next morning we wake up and we're like, oh God, I guess we're going to sell this vinegar. So we kind of morphed into this natural progression that he would make it and I would sell it. So he said, well, here's QuickBooks. This is how you create an invoice. So just create the invoice and then you give it to people when you sell it. And I said, how much do I sell it for? He goes, oh, I don't know. You just sell it. Just like, so we're making a bit of money, like whatever. So we found out that there was, just through talking, we spent a lot of time talking and we asked everyone questions. We're like sponges. We're at farmers markets asking questions. I'll ask questions of every one of you tonight. I just learnt 10 things from the lady I'm supposed to mentor today. I think I learnt more from her than she learnt from me. So we found this mentor down in Florida, and she was a food and beverage specialist, and she has been for 25 years. So we would talk to her for 3 hours every week and ask her, what's a price point? What does the gross margin point mean? Like, what do we sell it for? How do we get it off the shelf? So we started kind of getting mentoring from her, and we grew our business to being in most of the stores in BC. We're in 356 stores. And then I guess that's the point when you kind of decide how gregarious you are and are you really an entrepreneur? Like, do you want to grow the business and do you want to keep working that hard? Well, I didn't think I'd worked harder in my life, but I said to Norm, my husband, well, we can keep selling and we can probably make a modest income, or we can grow into the rest of the country. Now, I'm very competitive, and I was like, well, if we don't grow into the rest of the country, someone else might make a product like ours. They're going to get into the rest of the country. They're going to grow brand awareness. We're already one step ahead of everyone. I don't want anyone to catch up or overtake me, so let's go. Well, we didn't have any money. So that's when, and that's why the mentorship, and I'm going to talk about that now, and the women's entrepreneur, like providing this, is hugely beneficial. We decided we needed money, so we went on to Dragon's Den, and we ended up partnering with David Chilton, who's our partner now. And as soon as we shook hands on television, and this doesn't normally happen in the show, he rang us the next day and he said, great, I'm super excited, let's work together. We worked together every single day from then until now, growing our company. Even before we signed the deal, he said, I'm going to help you, like, this is where we need to go, and let's work together. So we didn't actually air our show until 6 months later, and then he said to me, well, Natasha, you're only in 356 stores. Why aren't you in the rest of Canada? Where's your US business plan? You're just not working hard enough. Well, I started crying, and I was like, are you freaking kidding me? I've never worked this hard in my life. And he said, well, you're not in Loblaws. And I said, well, that's because our distributor, because we thought that, you know, we could do the local stuff ourselves, but going out east, well, gosh, you need a distributor, or you need a broker, or you need someone to sell it for you out there because we're in Whistler. Well, he said, I said, our distributor hasn't managed to get a meeting. And he said, well, ring them up yourself. I said, ring who? He said, well, ring Loblaws and tell them that you want to come and present your product. And I said, really? Oh, it's Natasha from Nonna Pia's. You got 10 minutes for me? I'll fly out to Toronto and meet you. And he said, of course, ring them up. And I said, I'm not going to. The next day, he rings me up. He said, have you rang them yet? I said, no, I'm not doing it. The next day, he rings me up. He said, just ring them up. What have you got to lose? I said, all right, I'll ring them up. So I gave in. I ended up snagging a meeting at Loblaws somehow. I got the meeting, and then of course our distributor says, well, I'll come along with you. And I said, damn right you're not. So I said to my husband, we're not giving them 25 points. I got the meeting, they've been trying for a year. So we found out this way that we could get fired, that things just weren't working out, you really need to fire us. So we got ourselves fired from the distributor. And I went to the meeting, and we ended up selling direct to Loblaws, which was amazing because that allowed me to then curtail onto all of the other banners. Because when you're in Loblaws, you can go to Sobeys and you can go to Safeway and everyone and say, well, guess what? We sell direct to Loblaws, we're doing well. So that's how we kind of grew our business. And before we even went to air, and David along the way was definitely a huge part of it. Like, I'm serious when I say that every day we spoke to him. Like, I ring him every day, I text him every day, and I ask him lots and lots of questions. And right from the beginning, he said, we need to make a plan. And I said, what for? And he said, where we're going. I said, well, we're selling vinegar. He said, no, like, where are we going to be in 1 year, in 2 years? I said, I don't know. And he said, so we made a plan that what we wanted to do was sell our product in as many places as possible in Canada, because we were Canadian and local and we'd had national exposure. So it wasn't as difficult. But he said, when we go into the States, we need to be very strategic. Because when you go into a banner, for those of you that don't sell retail, you need to pay for your spot on the shelf. So you don't want to go into, we didn't want to go to Walmart USA, pay hundreds of thousands of dollars to get on the shelf and then not sell it because we're never going to get the return on our money. So we were very strategic and we picked the banners that made sense. So the next thing I did was I said, okay, so which stores do we want to be in the States? Google grocery stores in USA. Well, I fell off my chair. I'm like, really? Like, where do I start here? I don't even know. Like, who buys the most balsamic vinegar? So we started choosing banners and then started growing into the States. And every now and then I got so excited and I'd kind of lose a little bit of focus and I'd say, oh, well, you know, the agriculture minister just rang me up and he wants me to present to Mr. Japanese who's got the biggest market there, so I'm going to go and present to them. And he'd hang up on me and go, you know what the strategy is, don't even talk to me about that, click. And I'm like, oh, he doesn't know what he's talking about. So I'd just kind of sneak a meeting in down to Vancouver and present to Mr. Japanese. But he was exactly right in the fact that you can't kind of sway your attention when you have a plan and a strategy, because all of the companies that he'd worked with that had gone into the States had actually pulled out of the States because they'd made mistakes. They might not have been strategic with the banners they went into. They tried to get into as many stores as possible and thought that distribution was the key, whereas not that we've done everything right. We've got our distribution, we've got fantastic distribution, but now we need to get it off the shelf. And if we had great distribution and we're in the wrong banners, we're not going to get it off the shelf. So he's been key in keeping us focused and me particularly in control. So the next thing is when we've gone into the banners in the States, there's a lot of distribution and a lot of brokers that want to take your money. I call them box movers because they actually don't do anything. We did have a broker that was helping us trying to get into accounts, and I'd ask him for pictures of our product on the shelf. Well, I was getting one picture every month, and I swear it was the same picture of our balsamic on the same shelf, just recycled. And I'm like, that's the same picture. He said, no, it's not. I said, it is. I can tell by the angle. You're not even checking the stores. So then I realised that you get kind of one kick at the can, especially for big accounts. And if anyone's going to present our product, it's going to be me. So I started going and making meetings with the head buyers of big banners like Kroger, like Whole Foods. Oh, Whole Foods doesn't actually let you, but Stop and Shop, ShopRite, these are all big banners in the States. And the way that I found out who I was supposed to meet with was I Googled them, and then I'd kind of ring the front desk and say, oh, it's Natasha, I just want to speak to Bob again, you know, me ringing back, never spoke to him before, leave him a message, send him an email, ring him back again, he's like, who is this? And then finally I'd get a meeting, and then as I started to get accounts, then my email would be, we're already in here, we're selling well, we've got these accounts. So I started to kind of do the same thing down there. But I was going to meetings, and it's kind of exorbitant, but like in December I wanted to, Whole Foods is perfect for our market. I wanted to get into Whole Foods Florida because there's a banner down there called Publix, and Publix is big down there. It's a great banner. It's 1,600 stores, perfect for our product. Well, the lady says to me, I'm not going to look at you unless you're in Whole Foods Florida and Harris Teeter, which is another banner. So I do my Googling and meet with Harris Teeter, and after like 2 meetings, finally get listed there. Well, Whole Foods Florida says, come and meet me, you've got 20 minutes, that's it. Well, it's in Fort Lauderdale. 16 hours, I go, I have my meeting, I quickly go to the beach, run on there so I can kind of make the meeting worthwhile, quickly eat some lunch. So I say, oh, I was in Fort Lauderdale, did a meeting, had lunch, went for a run on the beach, it was awesome. But literally, I was there for an hour and then flew 16 hours home. But I got to present our product and we got listed. I mean, everything doesn't always go according to plan. I sat there for the meeting and I'd gotten all the way there and I had our product there, and I started like flipping through our product in the bag that my husband had sent me with. One of the bottles had blown up of one of our flavours. So I ring my husband, I go, one of the flavours is just blown up, like it's all leaking everywhere. He goes, don't present it. I go, well, of course. So I stick it in my purse. I get into the meeting, I'm like, well, we've got that flavour, we'll just have to ship it next week, but it's really good. If you taste it, it'll be really good. So, I mean, there's always challenges, but 90% of the banners that I've presented to in the States, I've presented to. And I don't know how many phone calls I've gotten in the last 6 months of people ringing up saying, hey, I want to get our product into the States, I want to get into the banners you're in, what distributor should I use? I've got the great product, I just want to hand it to someone and I want them to get it in everywhere. It's not going to happen. It might happen a little bit, but that buyer is never going to remember the broker when they presented 20 products. Even if you get lucky enough to get in, they're going to remember you. In fact, half the time when I present, they say, well, never mind the balsamic reduction. Like, who are you? Where did you come from? Like, why are you here? You flew 16 hours just to see me? Like, it's impressive. And it's hard work, but it pays off. So doing everything yourself, having a good mentor, and I was just talking to my lady there, having a good mentor, but someone that's kind of in your space to some degree, that has kind of had experience, is definitely important. But your mentor doesn't need to be one person either. We have friends that do have done bread and have done other companies. And I remember at the Whistler Farmers Market, I said to her one day, oh, we're about to order our first run of labels. It's so exciting. And she said, don't order a lot of them, because you're going to change your label at some point. I said, are you kidding me? We've just spent so much time on this label, we'll never change it. So I just go and order a stack because we're saving 10 cents a label. Well, 2 months later, she comes up, she says, well, the label's really great, but you do realise you spelled balsamic wrong. It says Balsamic. I'm like, oh. So there's our limited edition balsamic. Anyway, so ask, like mentors, as I said, it's not one person, it's kind of lots of people, and it's lots of asking and sponging and sharing information, because even sharing information, teaching obviously teaches yourself as well. The one challenge we did have with all of this growth was finding a balance. And I've got 2 kids, and I always feel guilty. Like, I was trying to fit everything in. I'd play Monopoly with my son and purposely lose as quick as I could so I could get my phone call done. I'm like, oh, you won, too bad. That was like, it's 5 minutes. I knew I had 5 minutes. So I was trying to be with my kids. The company's expanding. We're hiring someone new like every 3 months. We had all of our office in the house. We were going through trying to find money, trying to find an investor. David rings me up and says, well, I'm getting kind of some feedback about the packaging, and everyone's telling me that it's great to partner up with Nonna Pia because it's a good product, but the packaging's really ugly, so we should rebrand. I'm like, well, that can't take much work. So let's just ask that company that our friends Love Child use. Their packaging's great. So we start that process, and I'm given that job as well. So I start doing the rebranding, and then I'm ringing David every day going, this is horrible, like there's so much work. We get given one label, and he says, well, I said, I think it's fantastic, it's a great label, let's just use it. He said, well, I've just done some research with all of my friends, and they said it looks like there's an axe murder on the front of the label that's going to kill people, and it's horrible. I'm like, well, that doesn't matter because it's what I think. So we did go through this rebranding process, and then I started crying again. He said, well, you've got branding fatigue, like there's all these words in this business that, well, branding fatigue, like you're just making stuff up now. So we fight a lot. So anyway, finding the balance and trying to find out how I can make it all work was a big issue. And it was just the other month I said, you know, David, I can't find balance. Like, I can't fit everything in. I can't travel, have a husband, have kids, wear 10 hats, train people. The company's growing. We're looking for an investor. We've just finished like there were so many things. And he said, well, you'll never find balance when you're in a steep growth curve like this and an entrepreneur that has a business that's growing, so don't look for it. And that was probably one of the most valuable pieces of advice he could have ever given, because I was searching for something that I couldn't get. He said, you just have to manage as best as you can and do what you think is important. So I started kind of backing off my new baby, which was work, to the degree that I could, and started thinking about people that said to me, you know, no one ever looks back on life and says, well, I wish I worked harder and spent less time with my family, because that never happens. So I thought, well, we're not getting any younger. And then with the cash flow issues, he started ringing me up and saying, well, how's the business doing? And this is going on to the kind of finding the balance and making sure that you have enough people in your company, because you kind of get to that point where you say, well, we need to hire an extra staff member. Firstly, we can't afford it. We can only give them 10 hours a week, but next week it's going to be 20 and then 30, but we need the right person, but they don't want to work for 10 hours a week. Well, I don't know how. We would just hire someone and say, well, it's just part-time, we can't really offer you much more, and then the next day they're working full-time. And so all of a sudden we had like 8 people in our house working. And then David said to me 6 months before that, he said, do you have how's Loblaw's sales going? And I said, they're doing great. They ordered again yesterday. He said, what the hell does that mean? I said, that we're getting the orders, man. We're kicking it, like it's doing well. And he said, so how many bottles are you selling a week? Have we paid off the listing fees? What's our projections? I said, oh, no, that's too much information. I don't know any of that stuff. And he said, well, we need a CFO. And I said, now you're throwing more terms at me. I don't know what CFO means. We've got no money. We're just not getting one. Finished, gone. So then it was a while later, and then he asks me, you know, like what profit, like give me some figures, what have we done this year? And I'm like, oh, I don't know. He goes, did you get the CFO yet? I said, no, I told you, I don't know what it means, and we just really don't need one. So finally I give up. We get this CFO, and his name's John. amazing. I was like, oh my God, we totally needed one 6 months ago. So sometimes you really need to listen to advice when people, I take everything with a grain of salt, and sometimes it's not perfect advice, but a lot of the time people have done things before you and you will save money. John comes in, he's not only our CFO and tells us in a year's time we're going to need $1 million. I'm like, $1 million for what? But sure enough, we do. Actually, David said, we need to get an investor, and I said, great, I'll try and get a loan for $200,000. He said, we'll need $600. I'm like, oh, he's so stupid. So then we get John in, and he says, well, we'll need $1 million. But anyway, he starts projecting things, and then he says, well, where's your office? And he comes to our house, and literally, like, our neighbour is the kitchen production manager. She's French-Canadian, Patricia. She knocks on the door. This is our daily routine at 6 o'clock. Yoo-hoo, I'm coming to pick up the orders. So she comes and picks up the orders. Then staff start coming in and working. And then our in-house accountant, Tig, who we found in the village, who was cleaning, who's Irish, who had moved out here and couldn't get a job as an accountant. Well, we hire him to do accounts payables, which he's never done before, because he's kind of up here, and now he's like, I don't even know what QuickBooks is. So everyone in our company sort of starts with deer in headlights looks. So he ends up being our in-house accountant. Well, he likes to ski in the morning, so he starts at 2 in the afternoon, and then he's there at 10 at night. So my kids are like, can I Tig? Tig's like, yeah, sleep well. So it goes till 10 at night. So and John's like, are you guys nuts? Well, my husband and I are fighting, and there's people in the house, and I get home on weekends, because now they want to work weekends so that it's not as busy up the hill and they can ski in the week. So I get home and I say to Oliver, my son, close the door, because I don't want anyone to hear me, because they'll ask me questions and then I'll just be immersed and have to be in the office again. So John said, get the office out of your house now, and you need some infrastructure. Well, that's another term I didn't really know what he's talking about. And they need to be culturally aligned. Like, stop already. Like, now, infrastructure, culturally aligned, like, what is that? Everyone's like, got to be Canadian? I don't know. So we start filling positions, and then, because I'm like sales, I'm shipping, I'm everything. So he said, you just need to be sales, and there's one person for all these other things. So I was like, well, that sounds like a perfect world. We're kind of getting to that point now after John being with us for 6 months, and he's also been very strategic and aligned with David in that we need to keep our focus on where we need to be, as far as I'll go off on tangents still, and I'll talk to people about, I heard that the other day that Germany is the biggest seller of balsamic reductions. I can speak German, like that's huge for me, so I'm like, I'm going to Germany. But John's like, no, we're not ready yet, we're going to have a team meeting and plan out for the next 5 years and blah, 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 focus on the States. And I'm like, okay, I got this. So in the meantime, we've got no money again, and we're like, okay, we're growing into the States, I'm nailing it, I'm getting us into accounts down there, but we suddenly have no money, and we're literally like lying to people saying, oh, there's money coming, Todd's running down the street to bring you the check, and Mary's put it in the whatever, the excuses and the lies. I never knew about that in the beginning, because when we started our business, we would get bills and I'd pay them right away because I like everything clean. Well, the man up the road, Bill, comes down. He said, well, it's no wonder you've got no money. And I said, why? He said, because every time you get a bill, you pay it right away. I said, well, of course, it's a bill. I always pay my bills. He said, no, you wait 30 days, and then when you're going to pay, you give them a check, you don't sign it. And then when they ring you and say it's not signed, you say, whoops, that's a mistake, I'll resend it. And I said, oh, that's a bit dishonest, isn't it? But sure enough now, that's what we do. In fact, there's one guy that owns 4 ski shops up in Whistler. He said he bought a stamp from eBay that actually stamps a date on the envelope so that they think it got sent that day, but it really doesn't. And I was like, whoa, I don't know if I want to go that far, because... So we're juggling and we're thinking, what do we do next? We need money again. David invested again the year later, and then we're thinking we can do 2 things here. We can either get money from another investor and give up more of our company, or we can go to the bank. Well, KPMG, I don't know where KPMG is here, but they're like, you're nuts. Like, your company's growing so fast now, the 20% that you're going to give up is going to be worth a chunk in a few years. Just suck it up and borrow the money and take the risk. Well, my husband and I look at each other and I said, look, I can't do it. Like, we've got no financial security in our future. We have no RSPs. We've got a young family and a mortgage, so we need to get an investor. Anyway, to cut a long story short, we decided on the investor route, and John, our CFO, said, you guys need to make the decision. You're going to be the ones that need to sleep at night. Do what you think makes sense. We ended up spending the last 18 months looking for an investor. We walked away from one at the last minute once, and it was stressful. David said he's not the right investor, he's kind of a bit nuts. And I said, you're nuts, we need the money, we're going for it. And he said, no, you need to walk away. He ended up giving us some mezzanine financing so that we could find the right investor. And 3 weeks ago, we signed up for another minority investor, and that's the Jimmy Pattison Group. And John and David both rang us and said, you guys started off, at the Whistler Farmers Market, and look where you are now. You've got 2 major investors in your company that are really strategic. And it's to the point that, again, use your mentors, because Greg from Oceans, who's kind of our person at Jimmy Pattison Group, our go-to, said, call me whenever you want. Well, we've been partners for 2 weeks. I've called him every single day, and we met for 3 hours this morning, and he said, who's coming down to our office to meet with our sales analysis? I said, me, Rob, Norm, Doug. He's like, you bringing your whole team? I said, yeah, everyone needs to learn everything here. So take it, lap it up when you can, and give it as well, because the more you give, you get back. So I was asked to give a few things to take away, and I kind of touched on them. I hope I touched on them so that they're kind of, you can remember what I talked about within each one. But one is the mentor. Try and get a strategic mentor, someone that's going to help you, but don't limit yourself to one person. Secondly was, be prepared to do it yourself. Be passionate about your product and present it yourself. Don't let someone else take you successfully or not successfully where you want to go. 3 is balance. You won't find it. You'll never find that plateau where you can sit down. I haven't found it. And it's always going to be work, but do the best that you can. And the last thing was, just know that everyone goes through cash flow struggles, and the more that you can project what you need, like maybe that CFO person, if you can kind of work out that in a year's time you need money, it's kind of nice to be prepared, because otherwise you hit a wall, and a lot of companies have to stop because they don't have the cash and they start turning business away. So try and be prepared for that. And I hope that I get to talk to a lot of you later.